welcome to the Infinite Creative Podcast. This is episode number 5. My name is Fitz, and this is...
I'm Sean.
Yeah, so welcome back. Thanks for checking our podcast out. And yeah, hit the like button, subscribe if this is on YouTube, or just rate our podcast 5 stars because we already did 5 of them and we kind of want to improve stuff. But yeah, what is this podcast about, Sean, in general?
Creativity. Just about all of the different things out there to do with creating stuff, making things, being a creative person in the modern world, and all the stuff that revolves around that.
Yeah, and how to not make a living as a creative, because the struggle is real.
And struggle. I forgot that struggle as well, yes.
Yeah. I mean, if you're creative, you're an artist, and everybody's struggling with money. So sometimes we talk about the freelance world a little bit to improve our skills, because like Sean is the master of freelance in my eyes, because he's like doing it since like, how many years? 10, 15, 20, 30? Tell me. How old are you, 30. Sean?
I'm timeless. I've been around since the beginning. Yeah. I mean, 4 years of full-time freelance. So I can't act like I've been freelance forever. But yeah, 3 or 4 years of freelance now.
Yeah, I mean, it's the internet. You could do whatever you want to. You could say like you're doing it for 50 years. But yeah, people would figure it out. You can't lie on the internet without it getting figured out. So that's one of the things what I really like about it. But yeah. Oh yeah. And then, and how long have you been freelancing now? I mean, is it 2 years now? 3 years? 3? Yeah, 3-4-ish max. Like if I consider my first gig getting like $70, $50, yeah.
Now, have you ever been a full-time freelancer? Did you ever break into full-time?
Yeah, I tried while COVID with you, when we did our Renaissance fair together, and I'm like, okay, the restaurant is going down under right before COVID, not because of COVID. They embezzled money, and I'm just like, I got a couple clients. I had that fitness trainer, shooting him at the gym and doing stuff like that. And I'm like, then I had a couple other opportunities, and I'm like, yeah, I should make the jump. Man, what a timing. What a time.
Oh yeah. And just to be clear for everyone out there, the embezzled funds was not the Renaissance fair he's talking about. That was some other job business that he was part of. Got to be clear about who we're saying is embezzling money.
I was working at a restaurant, and the new general manager was embezzling money, and the restaurant went down under before COVID. And I just got through luck, a really cool gig where I'm like, everything is lining up. I should do this freelance work. And that was around the time we met, and we're just like having our coffee hangouts. And that actually brings us to topic number 1, system and processes. So it's kind of like a story time. I think I already mentioned it a couple times because I don't have that many freelance and gig experiences as Sean. But in general, yeah, we had a gig together because I was like, Sean, I want to do this jump now because I got money coming in and I feel like I could make it if I give it my all, And it's that moment where you're like, you're jumping and you're just like, you don't know what's going to happen. For me, it was a little bit unfortunate. It was like around February, and COVID was to hit on the end of February. And I'm just like, let's go all out there and have a photo booth at a Renaissance fair in Tampa. What was really cool, kind of, sort of. And I just came up with a random idea, like I get a booth for free, and I can set everything up, and I can charge money. I don't know for what, though. And I came up with an idea. And yeah, Sean, how was your experience there?
Well, it was really cool to see how excited you got. I mean, I think you're about to talk about, how your process should have been better. But I do want to pause and say there was optimism, and that was cool. That a lot of people would have gotten the call like, hey, you could have a booth at this Ren Fair tomorrow, figure something out. And they would have gotten scared, and they never would have tried it. So you did have that cool optimism that was like, let's do it. I'll figure it out as I go.
Yeah, I had also like a percentage, how likely it was to fail, And I think if you had like 3 days or something, and I'm just like, I think I'm like at 15%.
Oh, yeah. And if we're being clear, you kind of knew that you were running into the fire. I remember having those conversations with you where you're like, I don't know, man, we'll see.
Yeah, but I'm like, if the next step gets approved or I figure this one out, the percentage rises. And like one day beforehand, I'm like, I think we're at 80 to 90. Would you like to do the Renaissance Fair with me? Obviously not paid.
Yeah, well, I think it was a fun experience. I mean, it was good to watch you kind of learn through that too. Of like what are we doing? We're going to do a photo booth. Okay, what type of photo booth? I don't know. We'll just take pictures of people and I think it was a good idea. But yeah, we definitely had one day to get ready for it. I remember driving over there. I think everyone's done this. Driving over there, setting up a square in the back seat of the car, just like trying to figure it out while we're 10 minutes late to get there, trying to set up everything, looking at all of the other people that have done this all year. This is their career. So, yeah, it was fun.
Obviously, I was like not really prepared, did not really get a good briefing, didn't teach my employees what to do. And you and Rachel, you have like a very similar personality type where you're like a little bit introverted. You're very... Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm getting excited when I talk to people and I'm like getting energy and I'm just like, okay, hear me at a Renaissance Fair. This will be a banger. And you guys on the booth like, what we're doing here.
Well, it was funny because, a Ren Fair, people have all this time to get their costumes ready and stuff, but, we didn't have any time really. So, I mean, I was just wearing a beanie and a t-shirt that day. So it wasn't like, so we didn't even really match the crowd. But, I think even still then it was, you still got some customers, some clients. So I think,
and a bunch of
emails.
emails.
Yeah.
So the one thing that I want to go into is system and processes, and like the idea was to go to the Renaissance Fair, have a photo booth, take photos, print them out on demand, on the spot with a quick preset, edited, really simple and easy. So the photo looks a little bit cooler. Like 4 years ago, I don't know. Time is flying by, but back in the day, like the whole photo thing was not as big, So I thought like there would be a possibility that people want to have their cool costume printed out as a take-home photo, and that was the idea. Obviously, no real system, and we just run into the problem that like people showed up on the booth. So what happened, Sean?
I mean, we had a few different issues, right? I mean, the printer had a hard time connecting. I think I remember at first, I think we had a hard time getting a good photo out of it. So by the time we finally got a good photo to be printed for that first person, we just gave it to them because they stood around and waited for about 20 minutes while we figured that out. We didn't really have a backdrop, so, we had to just like try to find the most wooded area we could and have people stand there, but then the lighting was all weird, I remember, so we were struggling with the lighting, and so it was a struggle kind of all around, right? Like, we couldn't get the photos to print at first, we couldn't get the photos to really look great at first, but we figured it out, though. I mean, we took some good photos, I think, and we were the placement was kind of bad for us too, right? We were kind of, so that wasn't our fault, that we were kind of put way in the back corner somewhere, which was probably a good thing because we weren't super prepared, so we didn't want to be like in the front of everyone either. But yeah, so so for one day with 1 day of preparation, I don't think it's too bad. I think in terms of the systems, I think we could have figured out a few things. I think like how do you price this stuff? How do you
nothing was set up. Nothing. There was no pricing, no clear idea. Everything was flexible. And the kickoff, everything was like, I was running around taking photos for the event, and that's how I got the booth, And there's you and Rachel not knowing what is going on and figuring everything out on the fly. After I came back, it's like, oh, wait a minute. They don't know what they should do. And I'm just like, oh, no. And you guys figured it out, obviously, over the couple times or days, But yeah, that made me learn about that.
Yeah. So I guess so that was an interesting thing. Yeah, right before the pandemic, you said yes to something, and we figured it out. But I think that's while there could have been better systems. I think it's good that you jumped in. You learned a lot, probably just in 1 or 2 days of jumping into the fire.
Yeah, and I thought like for the first time, like systems and processes were not really a thing, I was just like doing things without thinking, what is like kind of bad. But that made me realize if I had a cool system, everything would be super smooth, and I could handle more customers and I could make more money, and that was the first time thinking about that. What is like, everybody has their life moments where they learn a lesson, you know what I mean? But you had something like that.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. To even get back to that, I mean, one thing I didn't really necessarily learn this from the Ren Fest, but one thing that I think is important for like when your friends do something like what you did is to do something like what me and Rachel did, right? Is show up for them, right? I think
Yeah.
that's a big thing in the creative world. I don't think gets talked about enough is that we're all looking for something super legit to be part of. So even when your friend does something and it's like, it's not fully thought through, it's not super legit, it's not gonna, you maybe need to step up. Maybe your friend, in this case, my friend Fitze, like needed someone to stand there. Like I can't imagine if you would have showed up that day all alone to do this thing,
Oh
versus.
boy.
At least be there and suffer with your friend alongside them, So I think, that's something I do want to highlight in this story too of like, when your friend's like, hey, I'm going to go start this crazy bumper sticker business, or man, we're really going to get into the Easter basket game or something really weird
Yeah.
like that, then show up for them. I think it helps a lot to have company in those cases. So I know that me and Rachel, while we were like, I don't know if Fitze really knows what he wants to do here, we were like, but let's show up, man. Let's be there for him, and at least show up for his creative idea.
Yeah, and I think that is like a good point too. Like alone for the support your friends, obviously friends, family, and whatever. But showing up is like 90%, or yeah, it's 90% of everything. Like sometimes people don't show up, and the work goes to the person that shows up, and it doesn't even mean you have to be the most skilled, or yeah, you just have to have the time and be available sometimes. What is really important to know too.
Yeah, and just don't be scared away from things if they don't seem super legit, right? Like, if just be
You
be
want
there
to
to be
say
a
I
good
was
friend.
not legit?
Not super legit. You're legit, just not super legit.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
had
so
insurance. I felt bougie. That was the first time taking out insurance for stuff, and I'm like, okay, I need insurance. Let's get one. And you were like putting me. What was that insurance company that you put me on? From something.
oh yeah. But yeah, I mean, so you did some things right there. You pulled out insurance for this event and everything. So you did things that some people probably wouldn't do. So I mean, yeah. So I think having a system together would have been great. I think like thinking through the process a little bit more would have been good that day. But it was fun though, and I think it's a good last memory before COVID kind of came in that we were just being
Shut everything
goofy.
down.
Yeah. So we're at Ren fairs taking photos of people and just being goofy, and so yeah.
Yeah.
So no, it's a good memory.
Yeah. Well, so how do you deal with like systems and processes? Because like you're like a different person than I am. I'm very ADHD, very unorganized, and you kind of the opposite. So is there a moment where you're like, okay, I need to tighten up my systems and processes, or did you had like a lesson where you're like, oh, this makes sense. This is how I can apply that to myself. That's how I think. Like I learned a lesson, and I'm like, how can I apply that to myself? Or I learned it through failing. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. So I mean, so I definitely, I would say I'm a very organized person. The reason for that, I think, is just because inside my head is so crazy. Like as a creative, I know that, and I think we have this alike where we have this kind of ADHD creativity thing that's like always going crazy. We're always thinking of stuff. If we see something that inspires us, we're already onto it and staring at like, so we're a kid in a candy store all the time. And
Yeah.
so for me, I think like early on in my career, I found that, and this still happens this day, I just know that this is something about myself, is that I'll go down rabbit holes. I love rabbit holes. I really do. Like, especially when I do something that's like visual, like let's say I got to make a logo. I love going down a rabbit hole and spending hours sometimes just like, well, we were going to do X, Y, and Z, but I found Omega over here. What's this Omega? Let's go check that out for 3 hours. And so...
Yeah.
So I know that about myself, so I create a lot of organization just to combat that, really. Like, right, if I create these systems and these kind of rails, then I can't get crazy. I can't waste time.
Yeah.
So, can I think of a time where that kind of became a thing? I guess
like
that's an art school thing, maybe. Maybe that's where that really came, because art school was definitely one of those things where art school is very unique where you have, depending on the art school you go to, but like you have multiple projects happening at one time, and these are big projects a lot of the time where they're taking a lot of time every week. So I have a project over here that, like, including the classes I'm going to, is like 20 hours a week. I have this project over here that's 10 hours a week. This project gets 8 hours a week, and then on top of that, I have a full-time job and stuff like that. So I was kind of forced to do that because I think in art school, that's kind of my earliest memories of just like, hitting the floor of just like, oh man, like I'm out of time. I spent too much time going down these rabbit holes, and the critique is in 1 hour, and I don't have the thing printed. I don't have it mounted. I'm not ready to go. And so once you have those, and once you get kind of embarrassed publicly, and when you have these projects kind of go terribly, and you see that, like, if I don't get organized, I'm just going to get embarrassed over and over and over again. Because you do have people that are organized, right? Like, once you see how well they do, then you're like, oh my God, like they're not even as good of a designer as me, but they were way more organized, so they win. Like their thing is on the wall, it's mounted, it looks beautiful, and I'm sitting here with like a glue stick or something, just like, crap, oh no, this is messed up, and then you cut it wrong, oh no, now I cut it wrong, oh God, the critique's in 2 minutes. So anyone that's been in art school knows exactly the story I'm telling of like, oh my God, it melted in the printer, the critique is in 5 minutes, oh geez, I should have like had this done yesterday, but I have no system. So I think that was where that kind of got beaten into me. I mean, that's a really good lesson, I think, to learn early, is that no matter what the system is, even if it's, I've seen people that like, that are artistic, so they have to, when they create their to-do lists in their sketchbook, they have to make all these sketches around it, make it look beautiful. And that's fine too. Like, so it's like whatever you need to do to create organization. But I think on the other end of that, though, to combat that, you have to have that blind optimism like you had for the Ren Fair, right? Like, because I've also done the opposite, where I've sat there and tried to map it out and plot it out and overthink it, and then I don't even end up doing it. So I think, it's balanced like everything else, right? Like, definitely plan ahead, but don't get too caught into just planning incessantly.
Yeah, Well, that makes a lot of sense. On that note, though, now I want to go into, like, this is episode number 5. We already did 5 of those. So how you think about, or what do you think about our process so far? I mean, like, the things you see, and how often do you reflect and actually, like, when do you improve the system that you have, Now I'm like, I need to improve it. But I'm just like, okay, what should I improve and how should I improve? You have like a system for that, like a reflection day kind of sorter, or you just go with the flow and like you notice something, you do it?
That's a good point. I mean, to be honest, that's probably something I need to do a little bit better job, is having kind of a reflection state built in. I think what you just brought up is actually a good point, that to have time set aside to just look at what you've been doing, just to review stuff. In terms of the show, it's been interesting, right? Because I think every week we after we show up. That's first off. Yeah, we show up. But then, like, I think once the camera stops rolling, we always talk. We always are like, okay, so what are we going to do this week? What's this week? So today we'll probably talk a little bit about that, because I think this week we we didn't really do our homework as much this week. I know I didn't really do my homework, so it'll be more like rehashing of like, oh yeah, right, we still got to do a couple of these things.
Get those PNGs over, and I got to send you some nice photos of myself,
Yeah, exactly. So that's the type of work that's going on behind the scenes, people. But so it's like, and then even the harder thing, right? Like, harder for me, I should say, because I'm not so experienced at it, is the marketing of this show. I think I've done marketing, but it's the self-marketing I lack in. So but I think it's something else that we're like trying to slowly improve and get better. So it's cool to see that we're doing the right approach with that, because again, I think if we went too hard in terms of planning, if we were like getting really intense about planning, it would kind of choke the fun out of this. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, so there's a couple of things really, because it's kind of a little bit loosey-goosey, what is a nice thing. Sometimes you need that where you're like, okay, we're playing, we're humans, and if you play, you learn things, and then you can improve it. But if you're like, you work something, then you're like, oh, I need this week 10 hours to actually do like thumbnails, edit, post, and do all those things. Everything adds up, and that maybe would choke it out, and where you maybe get away with like, okay, today I'm uploading this episode right before the podcast. What's happening right now? And that's now the second time. And I'm like, yeah, I should tighten up my workflow. And I'm just like, yeah, after this call, I should actually already start hitting the edit and prepare the next episode, and come up with topics. But, well...
Right. Well, yeah, and it's like, exactly. And I think for me too, one thing I've started to really get around is just when your brain's in a certain area to just keep getting stuff done. So like what you just said, like we finished this episode, your brain's in this world still. Yeah, maybe that's the time to do all the work that you need to do for the next week because your brain's on it. You're not having to shift gears left and right because that's the hard part, right? Is we have these like client projects, we have these real things happening too. So it's hard to be like, okay, let's shift gears now and make thumbnails for a podcast. It's difficult. It's difficult to shift gears of the mind. So that's part of the system too, is just realizing your own brain. I think that's been the biggest thing for me in the last year is just like, how do I think? Like what creates fatigue? And sometimes, because it really is that. It's like energy conservation, right? That's what you need to try to do is just like, because that's how you get exhausted is if you're like, an hour on this thing, 2 hours on this thing, 1 hour on this thing, 2 hours on this thing, your brain just is like doing so much work to try to get on the new rails for the new thing. So one thing that I've actually started to do recently, because I used to be kind of proud of switching gears, but now I'm kind of like, let's dedicate a day. Like, okay. Like I'm like, let's just finish it today. Like that's kind of my new MO of like, you're
saying things here after our improvement section, let's finish those things today.
Yeah, exactly. Right now, now you're gonna call me out on that. Like, later you'd be like, so how's finishing everything today go? But but that's how I am because like I think like having things end is important too. I mean that's what drives me crazy, right? Is when you have that project you keep coming to and you're not really finishing it each time, and then you come back and you don't finish it. You come back, you don't finish it. I mean it's exhausting. So it's like I like to just So in a perfect world I would too. Like when we hang up this call, it'd be like, okay, cool. So now I'm going to send you those PNGs you talked about. I'm going to get the thumbnails ready. I'm going to do the social media stuff that, I'm going to talk to you about after this episode. I'm just going to do all of this, boom, 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 and now it's done, and now it's off my head for the rest of the week.
Yeah, there's another thing before I forget it. Sorry for everybody listening, but this is like kind of, this is a live coaching session with ourselves and how we can improve everything. And you maybe take bits and pieces, but with the creative control, I want to, I'm a person where we're both creatives, and if you work with another creative, that's probably the worst thing you could do because everybody has a strong opinion, about doing something their way and whatever. But I was like trying to ask if I can get a little bit more creative control because I was like thinking about titles and, overlays and all sorts of stuff. And I'm like, what if Sean doesn't like it, Do I have the permission to just do things? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, well, no, that's
because I want to have like a little title and stuff like that. But if I run it through another, communication channel, then there's a delay, and then it's actually too much time and friction. You know what I mean? So I don't know if I should do that or if I should just do plain upload and whatever.
Well, I think this is a great example of a creative project and collaborating with another creative. So I mean, friction first off isn't bad. Yeah. Spending a little bit more time also isn't bad. I think this is where a lot of people like working with me a lot of the time. I say a lot of the time because not all the time. I don't want to mislead people. And it's because I actually have a very different approach. I think a way that I can tell an amateur creative from an experienced creative is an amateur creative. You would send them something and they would burn it to the ground and do their own thing. Where I always want to take what your idea was and try to improve it, right?
Yeah.
So even if you did an overlay or a title card, and I didn't necessarily think that was the way to go, I wouldn't just say scrap it. I would just say, well, your typography is not great here. Maybe we need to nail down this color, but other than that, we're good. So with that being said, I think it also comes from a place of trusting the other creative, right? Trusting that I'm not going to torpedo your ideas, and I got to trust that you're not going to torpedo my ideas too.
Yeah.
Because once you start playing the kind of, not really game, but once you start doing the thing where, well, I'm just going to start doing, it could lead to a very slippery slope, right? Because then I'm like, well, if he's going to start doing, well, then I'm going to start doing. And then you have two people doing things that aren't reviewing things with each other, that aren't really matching. And then you don't get the cohesiveness. That's that word alone I use all the time, especially in a branding process, because you get a lot of creatives in the room, right? And a lot of them I've realized, I guess I've always assumed this, but I just had a project recently where it really showed me that there's a lot of creatives don't know branding. Like, they've heard the word, but they don't actually even know it. So then I'm in there being like, oh, well, we should do this and this, and we need to be cohesive in this, and they all just look at me like, you're just trying to ruin the fun. That's all you're trying to do. And it's not that at all. It's you just got to create unity. So with like your creative control, that's totally great. I would say we should probably review back and forth. We should probably go back and forth on it.
Yeah.
But
can you dial a little bit down the audio, because when you get engaged, it's barely clipping. Sorry.
Okay. See,
Yeah,
there's
sorry.
some feedback right there. See, there's some feedback
or like
right there.
Step back, because like today you got the new mic. You also splurged some money, but yeah, I completely agree. But
Oh, this is an old mic. But yeah, so I guess to get to that, because this is funny. Yeah, people get to see like the creative process roll out like in a real situation. I'd say, do it, but don't use it as an come up with what you want to come up with, but I think we should always review back and forth with each other, right? I think we should, just like the logo. When I created kind of that logo, it wasn't like I just slapped that on stuff and didn't tell you about it. Yeah. It was like, well, what do you think? What do you? And you were like, well, make it a little bit more messy, and I'd like to still see our faces in it, and so that kind of feedback is good. So that's what I would say is that it may slow down the process, but that can also be an excuse not to collaborate.
Yeah, so my workflow, for example, if I work with somebody, if I get paid money and they're not giving me a lot of instructions, I just do my thing, kind of, sort of, like you said, like what you shouldn't do. But it never came back like as a got declined or something. But if I'm like not sure what I should do, and there is more input to having, like somebody wants to have input on what types call or blah blah blah, then I'm like, oh, I'm very preserved, so that's why I'm like, I don't use the stuff, but I should use it. And I think like it maybe hurts us more not having stock graphics, for example, like a stock title from Adobe or whatever. But on the other side, it's a stock thing, and it's not really, I didn't put the time in to make it optimized because, so I'm like, I don't know if I should do that, and that's why I was like, kind of like, should I just roll with the punches and you give me feedback and the next episode improves it? Is that the thing we could do?
Well, yeah, I would say, you could see in most podcasts that they evolve over time. So I think, nothing, I think we've both been very good about like nothing is permanent. Yeah. I think you're right, though. I think us adding some production into these episodes, is only going to do us good, Yeah. So I think, so even like I think we've been in these early episodes, we've been using purple, which are like this kind of lavender. Which, if I'm being honest, why did I land on lavender? Why did I land on that color? It was a very short road to get to that. Which is I was just like, well, what color does describe us? And I was like, well, what's the Pantone color of the year? And that's literally how I got it. So, because that's how my brain works. Like, let's just get it done. Let's just finish. And so, but that color could change over time. It's not like that's our color forever. I think, and just like the logo could change over time, that's not the logo forever. And so I think the same thing with the title cards. Obviously, every single episode, we don't want to have a completely different look and feel every episode. Maybe we do, but that's a lot of work. But I would say let's go back to the Ren Fair for a second. Have fun, jump into it. Be optimistic and be creative, and then. But yeah, it doesn't take that much time to kind of review something with me,
Yeah.
and then just adjust, because it comes down to trust. Just trust that I won't burn down everything that you've created. Oh, that title card sucks. Oh, everything you've done, you need to restart and tear it out. Because then the impetus is on me of like, okay, if you don't like it, how can you improve it? Where Fitze doesn't have to pull out all his hair to improve it.
Yeah. No, so here's the thing, actually. That reminds me of my first real gig, actually. And oh my God. So it was like a conference thing, and I was like subcontracted, kind of, sort of. So showing up is 90% of the thing, So I showed up 10 minutes beforehand, and the head photographer, who is also pretending to be a videographer, basically. So I hope you don't watch this, but but yeah. So he basically called the other guy. So he scheduled two videographers, me and the other guy. And how I got hired was like being at a cafe with a cafe spot with a camera, and he's like, "You do video?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do video," and that's how I got hired, But he called that guy, canceled him, and instead of like having two videographers, was just me there, conference kind of sort of style. He's like, "We're gonna film stuff, no planning," kind of sort of the Ren thing. Like he's like the version of myself in like 60 years, kind of sort of. So I kind of don't want to, take too much of that and adapt a more organized style, because like, oh, this is the peak, what it could be if I go this direction completely without improvement, But basically, we had the time where it's like, now it's crunch time, we edit the video, and I did everything, like the filming and the video, and I used like 80% of his shots, and oh my God. But in the end, the client did not really like the graphics, and it went through a back and forth through him, then to me, till they reached a point like, oh, now we actually need to take over the project. And he's like trying to take the project, but he didn't edit anything, and he also did not have like clear descriptions of what is on the to-do list, or anything. So everything went through like the whole back around to me. And then I went all the way back to him, and then from there to them. It was like, boy, oh boy.
Yeah, well, that's a good example, because it's like that goes back to your process, right? Of like, there should always be reviews, but yeah, it sounds like it was a lot of unnecessary telephone going back and forth. Where like, and I'm not and excuse my ignorance on the video world. I'm not a videographer, obviously, but maybe you guys could have done something where you took a frame with the graphics even before you did all the editing, just like, here's what a graphic looks like on the video, and sent that to the client before you put in all the time of putting it into the video.
That is a good call right there. Like, yeah, that would have eased, getting an example from the client and requesting that, because like I did all the changes he wanted, but then he sent all that back, re-edit the video with those changes because he requested them, so I made them, but the client really changed that again, and it's like,
yeah. Well, no, I think you bring up something that I think a lot of creatives, and a lot of engineers, a lot of builders and stuff can also relate to, is that you want like your review things to be very cheaply made as possible, in terms of like, you're not spending a lot of time on those first things that you're trying to throw at the dartboard. Yeah. So like in web design, I think I'm trying to. God, I can't remember this for a fact. This may be a little bit of a fib, but I think one of my first web design projects I ever did, I had something similar where I had like reviewed I think I had like one page, or like maybe like even half of a home page, like a flat comp I had made in Photoshop, because this is way back when I was making web design website comps in Photoshop, which I would not suggest to people these days. So I did that, and I think I had gotten approval, but what I should have done is I should have showed like a part of every web page. And I think I remember that process where it was very quick, so I got approval on like that one screenshot of a home page, and then I did the whole site, and then I remember like reviewing it with them, and they were like, no, man, like that top of that homepage is great, but this subpage is wrong, and that's wrong, and the menu looks bad, and this looks bad, and I had already spent probably 40 hours coding a whole website, and they wanted to scrap 80% of it. Where in that case it was like, but I could have spent 5 extra hours just to do a thing of each page. So that So now what I do, my flow now for web design is I always do a full prototype. Almost sometimes of every page if I have to. If I really feel like I need to, I will. I'll do every dang page in the prototyping software I use because I can move fast in that. That's a lot of just
So what does that mean though? Now I'm kind of curious about the web design world because like, does that mean you have to still code the same amount? You know what I mean? Because it sounds like, oh, you're making prototypes, so it's actually, what is the extra step that costs? Like, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. Yeah. And so in the prototyping, so I use a tool Figma, which a lot of web designers, UX, UI designers would know. And so for all of you out there, it's Figma. It's a free tool. So it's definitely something it's, at least worth dabbling in if you want. But what's great about it is it's a visual building tool. We lost Fitz's attention, but it's a visual building tool, and so with that, sorry everybody, Fitz actually has died now, and he has
in heaven.
He's gone to heaven now. So moment of silence for this podcast. It was 5 episodes.
It was nice. Yeah, it was nice knowing you.
But yeah, so now I use a prototyping tool just because it's so much quicker, right? Like, so there's little things, right? Like if I hold down Alt and drag something, I can copy it just like I would in a design software. If I want to eyedropper stuff, I can eyedropper it. And so it's like, so I just move so fast. For someone like me that cut their teeth on Illustrator, Photoshop, all these things. Now, I mean, how long have I been using those tools? And I mean, now we're talking 15 to 20 years as long as I've been using those tools. And so I'm a power user in that world. So I just move fast, right? I could design a whole page in Figma and about our whole website in Figma from scratch, not even using templated stuff, in about 6 hours. And you could tell me to scrap it, and I could come up with another one that quick. Where like a web design, like doing like actual development that's responsive and beautiful, that could take 40, 80, even 120 hours to do. So it's like, so the same thing I'm sure is in video, especially when you start to talk about rendering and things like that. It's like, you don't have time to render something that they may not want, right?
Yeah, so usually in the video world, that's how I do. I don't know if I should do it like that, but I usually have like, if it's a project that's a little bit vague, I'm like, okay, send me some inspirations. What do you imagine in your head? Like basically get me 5 videos, and I'm compile those 5 videos into whatever I shoot on that day and make them the same style. That's how I do, and so far it's serving me really well. So I never had like, oh, I don't like it. It's like, no, that's kind of what I wanted, and positive feedback. So I'm like, okay. But the thing is, like, that also leads to like, where's my own style? Because I'm just compiling styles of other people and just sending them like a random thing that is like their event.
Right. Well, no. I think you brought up something kind of important there. So in the branding world and in the web design world, but a lot in the branding world, I do things. You've probably heard of in the architectural interior design world, they're called mood boards. I've heard stylescapes. I've heard I do that as well, especially if you get a client that's like, they start to use these cliche words like cutting edge or sleek, or, you start to hear these buzzwords that you're like, okay, that doesn't tell me anything. That's when it, do your Google searches, compile all this stuff, and then show it to the client and be like, do you like this or you don't? At the very least, they're going to be like, ew, that's gross. I don't want that at all. And that's still good. I mean, that just saves you a lot of time. But with that, I would say, don't get too caught up in the idea of Google first, create later. I think I don't know, and this may be just me, but I always say, like, start pencil and paper or whatever, crayon or whatever you want, and start there, and just like before, because I almost feel like Google will taint your creativity. Because
I see what you mean. It limits you at what people will do. Because like, if you maybe would have thought about it, you would have come up with the next cool trend, or like this shot, that everybody's imagining, but nobody put the finger on it.
Yeah. The coolest stuff are sometimes the weirdest ideas. One thing that I think I can. This may be kind of a reach for a metaphor, but. So when you have a book that's like a really good book, and it becomes a movie, it's always interesting, right? The people that read the book first and then they watch the movie, they almost never like the movie, right? However, if you skipped reading the book and just watched the movie first, you'll be like, oh, the movie's awesome, but you don't know what you're missing out on in the book. So that would be my kind of example there, right? As well, while
Yeah, I
Googling cool designs, that's like skipping the book and going straight to the movie. Like, you're gonna miss the cool weirdness that could have happened. And once you've seen the movie, you can never go back and read the book without imagining the movie now. All the characters are gonna look like how the movie defined it. You're not gonna be able to define your own characters then.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That makes a lot of sense, to be honest. Like, on that note, I maybe have to, implement that too in my process, and like think about occasions where it's like, okay, now I can risk stuff, because there's certain times where you have a client and you cannot risk anything, like, let's say it's a wedding, everybody saw the wedding videos, and you're just like, okay, yeah, we're doing a wedding style video. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're just doing the thing.
Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, weddings are exactly. That's actually a great example. Weddings are interesting because it's like, and a lot of time, those clients have already done exactly what I just said. They already did those Google searches, right? They already looked up, what does a wedding invite look like? What does a wedding video look like? So it's funny because sometimes the client has already cheated before you even get a chance to cheat. They're already like, nope, we're gonna do watercolor leaves, and we're gonna do in white on wood, and all these So that's interesting too, right? And I've had a couple of times where I have people come with those ideas that they've already Googled and predetermined, and I have to be like, well, no, let's play a little bit. And it's funny how when you're the creative that's trying to introduce play, you're trying to introduce weirdness into the mix. That's sometimes I'm in that role where I'm like, well, we could do the cliche route, but I had this weird idea.
So you want to take them back to the kitchen, like, hey, let's throw some things in there. How about this?
Exactly.
I like that.
A little salt on that. Exactly. But yeah, so no, I think that was I think that's a good point though, of like, have play, but yeah, also it goes back to the point of like, don't go down the rabbit hole too far though, right? So for me, I kind of use this too interchangeably, so I'm a little hesitant to even say this in this podcast, but I'll go ahead. So because we haven't really covered design sprints and what those are, and they are an actual thing.
Okay.
But one thing that I use a lot in my world, like when I'm planning things, is I'll actually say the word sprint next to it. So, and what I mean by that when I tell myself that, like when I have that in a to-do list, that just means like, we don't know what the heck's going to happen. Here's an hour to be in the sandbox. And so this is an hour of play, and so that's what sprint means to me, of just like, it's like a hackathon in your own brain where, so like a logo, I almost always do that because logos are interesting. I think there's a lot of logo designers out there that think they're great logo designers, but they go such a stupid simple route that it's like, while it can be clean and bold, it just doesn't, people may look at it and be like, oh, that's really great. And then, like, it just leaves their mind. It leaves their brain because it really is boring, right? Like, I've seen so many. You've seen so many logos that are like, here's 3 triangles, here's a square with a circle cut out of it.
Wow.
You see these modern logos, but people don't really realize that the old modern logos that were that simple, there was lots of thought put into it, lots of effort put into it. Now you getting Illustrator and getting a circle and getting some like bold type and reversing it out of the circle, that's like not that much. That doesn't tell me you played at all. That doesn't tell me that there was any play in this. That just tells me that you were just trying to get to the solution as fast as you can. So I think that's part of the process. You got to play.
Yeah, not gonna lie, because it's like a basic shape. Sometimes basic shapes are fire. I was like thinking about the triangle thing, and I'm like, there was a time where every shirt had a triangle on them. And I was just like, dang, I miss my shirt with the triangle and the palm trees. So I'm like, goddamn, Sean, even though you make that good point right there, I'm just like, I want my shirt back.
I want my shirt back.
When the things just disappear, you're like, where is that actually? I have no idea.
Oh yeah, I have lots of cool stuff that's been lost. But I know that I'm saying that, and I know the second that this podcast ends, I'm gonna be like, oh wait, I did make that logo with a circle reversed out of a square once. So, so I think
nothing wrong with that, but you have to keep it in consideration. I think
as long
that's
as
what we should do.
as long as that's what came out of the play, right? You know, as long as you're honest with yourself that you're not just trying to get to a solution as fast as you can, which you are. I think it's good to play though. I think your clients should want you to play as well a little bit. Obviously not play too much, but the best work that I've ever done is just me having the wackiest ideas. And and you know, sometimes they don't work, but you know, I think, you know, we'll get into this a little bit more maybe in later episodes, but you know, that's where showing the risky thing next to the not risky thing. So showing them both versions. Here's your square reversed out of a circle, and then over here is like, you know, a palm tree exploding out of a sun, exploding out of a whale. I don't know, you know. So it's like, you know, so it's like kind of like, you know, it's good to like do these things that are risky, right? I mean, you look at, I know I always talk about logos and stuff, but you know, just looking at logos, like what are some risky logos? Like Nike's an interesting logo, like a check mark, really? Like that's how did you come to a check mark for a logo for a shoe company, right? You would, a lot of people would be like, oh well, it's Nike, which you know, it's a shoe, so maybe we should have a shoe logo, or maybe we just have Nike in this very simple font, and it wouldn't have done anything. But a check mark, like getting to a deeper story, that you had to have done some weird brainstorming to get to that point of like, what does check mark mean? Oh, it's checking off something that I need to do, just do it. Oh, so it's a check mark. You know, getting to those kind of weird connections and places, you have to have play somewhere in there. You have to not have Google, you have to not have what everyone else is telling you to do, and you need to sit there and play.
Yeah, on the video side, for example, that is like the things where you're like, that's where I'm like always curious about people's creative projects, you know. Sometimes there's really clean-cut companies who do YouTube, for example, and it's like very boring and it's not creative. And this actually leads really good into my next topic. But yeah, so basically like being creative and trying things out and expressing yourself is like a big part of this generation nowadays, because everybody has the same tools. We have our smartphone, we have a camera, and it seems like to be one of the new basic skills, like filming yourself, expressing yourself, and basically becoming a videographer and photographer. What is like one of those hip things to do, and so here's my problem with that, because like everybody is doing it, like even your grandma, grandpa, everybody has a phone, everybody has a Facebook, and they're posting stuff, and the stuff is just getting better and better and better with AI and just the general skill of the population. So I'm like, okay, so now it's more about like the creativeness, the mud, throwing it on the wall, and who can express themselves the most creative, and the clean cut stuff most of the time doesn't cut it anymore, which is weird.
Yeah.
So what's your 2 cents on that?
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I think it is interesting. I feel like your profession is in an interesting place, right? Well, mine is too. We've kind of touched on this too in the past, of the democratization of the tools, right? So to be a videographer 50 years ago would have cost a ton of money, right?
Yeah.
Like if it was like, you know, 1972 right now, it would cost a ton of money to become a professional videographer. You'd have to probably have 10, 15. Is. Yeah, well, kind of, because it's like to become that high level one, probably. But you're seeing a lot of low level to mid level ones probably getting by on stuff like on like iPhones and things like that. And in some ways it's good. It is good that there's some type of democratization that like people like, because like you said, it's the old kind of metaphor that like the rising tide makes all boats rise type of thing, right? So if everyone's quality of videos is getting better, including grandmas and grandpas, then that means yours are going to technically have to get better. So it kind of pushes everyone up to be a little bit better. I've seen it happen in the design world where it's a lot of the things like Canva and things like that have kind of popped up where people feel like
Canva again?
So Canva is just a tool that uses a lot of templated things to create designs. So a lot of social media people use it to quickly create posts. But it's really branched out to like presentations. It claims to do things like email templates and things like that. And so a lot of marketing departments, a lot of teams now are like, oh, well, who needs to pay Sean when we can just have Canva, and me as the marketing person, I can create a post willy-nilly in Canva. Now, the problem about this, and we'll get on this in the next episode. Next episode, I want to do a deep dive on Canva and the problems with this kind of new type of thinking. But I'll touch on it now, is the fact that what I just told you about the sandbox, right, of just like starting from scratch and really allowing the universe to kind of funnel what's the solution, and really exploring and having that, goes away with these tools. Canva has this templated thing, right? Here's some layouts we've already created. Here's some colors that we already have. Here's this list of fonts that we already have. And while, yeah, you can piece those together and it creates a way more solid design than people ever could have before that had no design experience, there's no play. And then everything starts to really look the same. And there doesn't really tell a brand story, right? So I can't tell you, and you probably see it too, all the social media posts out there where you can just see it's like kind of cliche. It's just like there's all these floating circles and squares or something, or there's this goofy font. You know, you just see these things and it doesn't really tell a brand story. It doesn't really have a soul to it. And so I think that's a problem there too, is that these tools, and I'm sure you see the same thing in videography and stuff, right? Like I definitely know that
it's kind of conflicting right now, because like on the one side, if you do a high polished video, people see ads and swipe, it's gone. They don't want to see ads. They want to see relatable content. So the more unprofessional you get, the more views you will get. But, you know, why would a company want to, you know, it's like, it's so backwards.
Well, yeah, and I think people think that something that's clean and perfect is what people want. But, you know, to kind of get to music, you know, I never talk about music. I have these in the background. But, like, one of the things that I've seen happen in rock, and I've seen in other music too, even EDM now is starting to get awoke to this, is that like perfect isn't necessarily sexy, right? Yeah. Like sometimes imperfection is cool, sometimes friction is cool, sometimes weirdness is cool. If it looks perfect and it looks polished and clinical, it's pretty boring, right?
Yeah, I think there will be also a new renaissance with the new AI stuff and whatever, and everybody's like, oh yeah, AI generated, I like it. And actually it will probably have the effect where everything that looks too good, too perfect, will be like, ugh, I don't like it. It's probably made by a machine. You know, when people look too pretty, you're just like, is that person even real? I have like a model that actually edits her photos and she looks like a 3D animation. I'm like, yeah, this probably, you know, the more imperfections you have, you more relatable you will become, and it will be the renaissance. Like, you hand draw this logo, or it actually looks like not perfect, I like it, you know. Maybe.
Yeah, there may be something to that. I think, and because I've seen that in music. I know I tend to like the music that's not perfect now, right? You can just hear it when it's this polished. You know, listen to any stock music out there, really, and it's just too clean and too perfect. It starts to feel weird, almost like alien. It's not made by humans. And so I think to kind of go back to your kind of original point here is that, while these like, there's these tools and things that kind of make it easier to have things be clean and stuff, you still need creativity there. You still need to have that creative thought and that creative ability to make something from nothing. And what my warning to creatives out there would be, do not lean too hard on the tools. The tools don't define you. They just don't. And they never did, including these new automated AI tools. They're still just tools. You can't let the tools define you. You are the creative. You're the one that can come up with the cool idea. You're the one that can come up with something new. Not these tools. You can. So yeah.
Well, that's a good point. It's a really good point, and I agree with that. On the video side, like I said, like for me personally, I'm like, where should I lean into? You know, should I lean into the creativity or should I lean into the clean cut thing? You know, so you get the higher paying clients, and everybody's like, oh yeah, this is clean cut, or should I just do the creative stuff and just ignore basically the professionalism, because everybody who's doing it goes that route, but it's not getting rewarded, and the more you go the other way, the better. Oh, battery died. 1 second. You take over,
so
Sean.
He went to heaven, and now he has gone to hell, everyone. Fitze has died twice on this podcast. It's number 5, and he's gone now. He's gone. So this will be Sean Craig and the Creative Solo podcast. We're gonna miss Fitz-A. He's gonna be very missed. But yeah, I mean, for all of you out there, I'll go ahead and juggle this while he's coming back to life. So I think that the big thing I just want to make sure that everybody out there just kind of knows is that he's back. Is that
should have plugged in my battery processes.
So one thing that I watched this last week, I watched Thor: Love and Thunder that just came out recently, and that's Taika Waititi was the director of that, and he's obviously very famous for just being very goofy, right? I also What We Do in the Shadows, I can't recommend that show enough. Such an amazing show. Just lots of goofy, weird humor, and he takes lots of chances. But it's a very clean movie, right? Like it's a Marvel movie, so it's very clean. It's doing all these very clean things. It's not wacky in how it's made. So he's a great example of he can use the tools, he can adapt with the tools, but he doesn't lose that weirdness, that goofiness, that whatever made it work, right? Because I think people too, I find want to get rid of that weirdness. I can't tell you how many times I'm having to defend decisions even to other creatives that are but let's just make it perfect, let's just do what they've done before. So you have to defend that weirdness, you have to stand up for your own weirdness. And so does that mean it needs to look bad? No, it can still look polished, but the ideas are where the weirdness can happen, and the weirdness is so good. I mean, there's so many examples in the video world of weirdness working, right? So when Burger King needed to get more money, whose idea was it to have weird commercials of someone waking up and there's this guy in a mascot costume of the king sleeping next to them? What a goofy, who would have thought of that? You had to have play, and some people would argue that doesn't sell burgers. You didn't show me any beautiful burgers in that thing. You didn't do what people have done before, but that worked amazingly because you remember it. And the things that you remember are the weird things. That's the best stuff you remember. And that's any creative, that's really what we're trying to do, is create something memorable.
Yeah. Man, we need so my voice is cracking and everything is failing on me. It's the end of the world for Fitz. But
this is the end.
Yeah, on that note, we need to hit on the last topic, and it's marketing. And I was trying to go. In the beginning, my segue was we're talking about the process from the podcast, and then we're going to marketing. And I wanted to talk about video and how do you marketing yourself. And this is obviously a thing we all have to improve. But I kind of want to hear your thoughts and ideas and the things you do. And so I can maybe steal a couple ideas. Any tips?
So what are you asking, I guess? Are we talking about marketing on videos, or what are we talking about?
No, your marketing. You do any marketing at the moment, and how is it going, and what is your experience about marketing?
Oh, man. Well, I actually want to hear
just a quick summary.
I want to hear your thoughts more than me on this. I feel like you're better at the marketing yourself than me. Yeah, I mean, my marketing is not that great right now, but it's working because it's word of mouth marketing, which is the best marketing.
So the good work that you put in, and you get the word of mouth.
Good work, good vibes. I mean, even yesterday, I was visiting another client, and someone in the waiting room was overhearing us talk, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we need a web design too, and we just talked about that this morning. So can I get your card?" So that's first thing, is always have a card. I can't tell you how many people I'm like, "Do you have a card? Do you have a business card?" And they're like, "No." And even, and I have the tap things as well. I know that there's that technology of tapping on the phone, but you know what? You'd be surprised how many people that doesn't work for. It's at least half the phones I've tried that on don't have the tap technology. So I would say get business cards. Definitely. I know it's an antiquated thing, and a lot of young people are like, "Ew, who has business cards? That's such a sellout thing." But man, there's people I've wanted to give jobs to, and they're like, "No, I don't have a card. No real email, nothing to." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna forget about you once I leave." So
talking about real email, it's info@fitz@gmail, or info@fitz.com, not Gmail. Sorry.
Is it just Fitz? Fitz? Is that it?
Fitz-A. Sorry.
Oh man, see, you got to work on that, man.
God. Yeah, I got to need all my sales pitches. Goddamn, too many things. What is yours?
So for me, it's so for my email, it's just hello@SeanCraigCreative.com. I'm actually gonna probably be rebranding here slightly here fairly soon. I just mean slightly because it'll be a very similar name.
Okay.
But yeah, so, for the marketing though, I'm trying to get better at things like social media. I think you do that a lot better, of connecting with people, doing things that are out there in the social media realm. I think we've had lots of conversations about that in the past, so I won't really get into that. But I think, yeah, in terms of the marketing though, it's also putting your name on stuff, I think. Now don't ever get in front of the project, right? It shouldn't be, you shouldn't.
Sometimes, if it's like a low-paying gig, definitely put it in front of there. Make your logo the first thing they see. If they don't have the budget, make them pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. That could be part of it, exactly. I definitely am a fan of that. I tell a lot of people that I'm surprised that there's not more creatives that do that, where they, if the client doesn't have enough money to do what they want, we'll be like, okay, well then, then be like partnered with and have my logo and have it linked to my website. So for me, signing my work seems to do a lot of good, because it also means that you're proud of what you've done. So on a lot of websites, putting, proudly created by Sean Craig Creative, doing that, it signifies that I will stand behind my work.
I like that.
Well, it's interesting, and I am about to change the name of my company slightly again.
Can you hint? Because I really like your name, and I think you should keep it and just pay for the domain and just maybe off-sell it or just keep it.
Well, yeah.
It's a good name, Sean Craig Creative. It's a lot of.
Yeah, so I think so we can dive into it a little bit. So with Sean Craig Creative, the one thing that I have struggled with is having other people attached to projects, right? So Fitze is part of Sean Craig Creative. It sounds a little weird. It sounds one thing I've changed, and this actually happened because of tax reasons. We can have a whole tax episode.
We should do that. We need an accountant. Get your accountant, and we get him on a podcast, and we ask him our most favorite questions, and he can promote his service. How about that?
Yeah. That may be in a future episode. So I'm changing it. So I've changed the back end of the company to be SC Creative. So it's nothing too different. It's instead of Sean Craig, it's just SC Creative. Now, but that I do lose my name when I do that, and I have had some people tell me that having your name on the company is like a mark of confidence. It's like that I'm confident in what I do, so I'm going to put my name on it.
Also, it looks less scammy. There's a lot of weird names out there, and you're just oh, do they run with the money? If they go under, I don't care. You feel like you will lose everything to a company that has a weird name, unless it's a real name.
Yeah, and I've gone back and forth on this. We may be going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here. Is that over the years, it's funny when you have these firms that have these names, or these agencies that we're Oak Tree Creative, and they say we a lot, we, and then it's just a guy. It's just one guy, and so it sounds.
It also looks bad. Yeah,
people
it's a weird line. You want the company, but you want the trust of the person.
Exactly, and people do trust teams versus one guy. So I get why people do the we, and trying to seem bigger, but then it almost always comes out that you're just kind of being schizophrenic. That there is no we.
It's just 5 guys.
You and your 5 personalities, maybe. Yeah, like the 5 hats that you wear.
Yeah.
But anyway, to kind of zoom back out to the marketing piece that you kind of originally asked, for me, it's the word of mouth. It's showing up. I think that's something that a lot of people, as more people move digital, it almost seems like you become more of a hot commodity if you have the guts to go out in public, because there's less and less people that have the guts to go out in public.
Actually, when we went, what was that, pottery, where I was really impressed, you're really old school there. What I really appreciate. So you took me, we were having our coffee thing, and we went to that train station or whatever shenanigans it was. And you introduced me to people. I'm like, we're going actually now to a place, and I have to meet them, and shaking hands. And you're just real old school, shaking that hand, and this is Fitz, and you're doing your thing. I'm like, that's very impressive. I like that, Sean.
Oh, well, cool. Well, thanks. And that's something I've definitely learned, is just going around shaking people's hands, and making sure to introduce people to other people too. I love doing that. Yeah, because it also shows that you're not, I'm not trying to protect anyone, right? Like, I definitely want you guys to always, I want people to work together. I want people to kind of, so you create this kind of network and this kind of vibe that you're on everyone's side. It does a lot of good. It really does. So I try to create that for myself where I'm like I want everyone around me to succeed, And so, but yeah, I think
that makes you want to be around those people, and and that it's an endless cycle of positivity. Because there's a lot of people who want to be too competitive and being like, oh no, I'm gonna get that gig, and I'm, it doesn't work like that. It's the internet, it's relationships, it's humans, and you don't want to compete with somebody maybe.
Yeah, it can get gross. It can get gross for people, and I don't think people realize that when they see that you're gonna, you're gonna fight for this and that you're gonna undercut people and stuff, it's just gross. Nobody wants to, everyone wants that person that they can have a beer with or that they can hang out with. That's the people that they want to work with, right? Like if I'm gonna make you money, I want you to be kind of a cool person that deserves that money. I don't need that guy that's. I can tell you how many creatives that are really, 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 really talented and do sometimes better work than I do, but they just are so competitive and just so. Egotistical, cutthroat, and it's just gross. It doesn't matter how good the work is, even at a certain point. It's like, I don't really want you to succeed. So what's interesting too is I just think people are more and more afraid to do marketing in person. I think.
I had that fear, and I'm like, why do I have that fear? Because I'm a very social guy, If I get naturally introduced, that's how I like it, No pressure. I was like, I'm walking into a person and I randomly talk to, but going there with a purpose, like, hey, I'm going there to introduce myself. It's kind of weird, or So I'm like, I like natural things, but I should overcome that a little bit and get more used to it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. Well, because I think you're great at socializing. I mean, I do have to celebrate you for a second. You're awesome because you have this very innocence about you. You're so innocent, and I think that in itself is very attractive to people. That you don't. There's so many serious people out there that just want to always wear their serious hat, and they're all about looking really serious. So having you, where you're a German in U.S. English is a second language. You get excited about stuff. Like I can literally see.
Technically, that should be the red flags. He could run.
Well, yeah. I mean, we like Germans. We like Germans here in America. We're okay with them.
I got a good side.
Hasn't been 100 years yet, but we're getting there. We still like you guys. But I think there's something about you that I think attracts people. I've seen that before, and I think. And I think a lot of people out there, it would be the same thing. So I would say any of you out there watching this, if you don't go out, you don't go to the coffee talks, or you don't go to the meetups, or you don't go to these things because you don't think that you're really that attractive, or you think you're dorky, or you think you're goofy. Just so that could be the most attractive thing about you. It sounds weird. That you'd be like, no, I need to look like Brad Pitt or Angelina Jolie walking, and they're like, no, you really don't. The goofiness, people like that. They really do. They like to see a human. They like to see someone that's not some robot.
Yeah, I think on the one side is the whole thing what you're saying right now is basically lean into your personality. The more true you are to yourself, the more likely it is people will vibe with that. Because if you're an introvert and you go into that kind of should not lean into it, but you kind of should lean into it, It's you have to deal with certain things and you have to get out of places, but you can express yourself hey, I'm an introvert and I have to talk now to people. I hate doing this, but if you're honest about it, they're like, oh yeah, I got you. Then you feel better about it. And other introverts who talking to you by chance are like, yeah, I'm an introvert too. And boom, it's clicking, Just lean into it and be yourself kind of, but still push yourself a little bit.
Yeah, but that's what I would say is because I've had a few people that I've had talks with that are like, how do I get business? I don't know how to get new business. I'm online, I got Instagram, the algorithm kind of likes me maybe, but I'm still not getting anything, and I'm reaching out to people online, and I'm sending cold emails, not getting anything. I would just say just get out there. I mean, even you and I, when we would go to a cafe, how many people would just walk up and say hi, or oh, I saw that you were doing this, or just go somewhere. You'd be surprised how many people will reach out to
buddy, you. Like what we did. It made me money. I had that conference thing back in the day, And you met that weird, not weird, but you met that IT money guy, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You remember? There's people you randomly meet, but obviously it's a numbers game. You go there once, nothing's going to happen. Go there twice, maybe.
Yeah, and it's practice makes perfect, right? I mean, as a true introvert, I can tell you, I still to this day can get nervous before events. There'll be like a networking event, and I'm in the car, sweaty palms, just like, okay, it's gonna be okay. And I've been there. Even the other night, I went to one of my friend. He's a DJ. I went to his show, and I even got to experience firsthand the awkwardness of like, I didn't really have anyone else. I came with him, so when he was DJing, it's just me standing like awkwardly, kind of in a bar, like by myself, being that guy, just like the
DJ is so good.
He's so good, and but. And nothing really came out of that night, but what was cool was just connecting with a few people and them seeing my face, right? Yeah. So now if I show up again, I'm not a stranger. So that's what I would say too.
Maybe return the favor. It's like all good karma.
And yet again, it comes back to like when I showed up for you at the Ren Fair, right? So I know he appreciated that I was there. I know he appreciated it, and that means the world to people. But I think that's the big thing too. Is like the more you're out there, the more people will see you too. So even if you go to a networking event, let's say you go to a coffee talk, and you do not make any connections, you don't have a business card, and you don't get anyone else's business card, and you don't do
you don't even talk to anybody.
Yeah,
sometimes
let's just say
it builds trust. Like, oh, this is a regular guy. Now I'm approaching him. But if you wouldn't do the first step, you don't build that trust either.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So that's exactly what I was going to get to. Is that like just by you being there, you've already done good. You've already done good. You've already won in my book. Like, as long as you don't like really do something terribly wrong, which you probably won't if you're an introvert, you're just gonna, you may be just a little bit reclusive.
Just keep on breathing. You got this.
Just keep breathing. You're there, and and you belong there. I think that's another thing too that we could have a whole episode on is the imposter syndrome. And I know that a lot of people feel that, especially if you're just starting out in creativity. You haven't made a lot of money. You haven't gotten a lot of awards. You haven't got a lot of pats on the back. You're like, do I even belong here? Like, do I really even belong in this room? Just know that since you showed up, you belong. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Simple. End of story.
That's a good note where we should end on. You showed up, you belong.
Yeah, that's a good note.
Good. Yeah, that needs to be on a mug, Sean.
You showed up, so you belong. Yeah, it's true. We need to start keeping notes of these things. We got to get some merch out there.
Come on, let's put it right down right now. You showed up, you belong.
You showed up, you belong. Write that down.
Write that down, assistant. Oh yeah, thank you, no problem.
I guess I could type it up too. I'm like.
Oh god, this is terrible.
But yeah, so I think this is an interesting episode. I guess it was interesting because in this episode we touched like kind of 3 different topics, but they were all the same in the way of don't be too worried about being perfect. Being messy can be awesome, so that could be in your work being messy. That could be in having a live stream that the camera dies twice in the live stream. That could be in going to a meetup or something and not maybe not being perfect and polished. It's just don't be afraid of the perfect. Just get in there, get your hands dirty, because some of the best stuff out there is from that. So yeah,
I agree. Ending on a good note there, I think. But first off, I was like, okay, we should talk about what Sean wants for marketing and what she was doing. But I'm like, yeah, we also skipped myself. But I think it's now an hour and 12 minutes, so we should wrap it up. The podcast should be, I think, like in general, an hour. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, no, I think, we're going to hit on this stuff again and again. Yeah, we definitely, I definitely want to get into Fitzay's world, I think, a little bit more here. I think...
it's a weird world, my dude. It's a weird world. But, yeah, we should give a call to action. Like, guys, hit the 5-star button on Spotify, rate this podcast, check our YouTube thing out, and also subscribe there because we need them subscribers, we need that AdSense, we need them sponsors. And yeah, we want to keep that thing going and educate and entertain and be ourselves.
Yeah, and if you have any ideas or if you want to be on our podcast or if you just have anything at all, feel free to email us at infinitecreativepodcast@gmail.com, Infinite Creative Podcast on Instagram. Feel free to message us there. Again, my email's hello@seancraigcreative.com. Fitzay, I think yours was info@fitzay.com.
Yeah. FITZAEY.com.
Yeah. So other than that, thank you, everybody. It's episode 5. We're still here.
Still kicking it. So have a good one.
Yeah. See you guys.